So this morning I have I'm speaking on Genesis chapter 22, Killing Our Dream, I've called it. It's sort of one of those chapters in the Bible that you sort of skim over because something about someone sacrificing their son doesn't seem to fit too well with what you know, well, certainly what I know of God in the Bible. So it's an interesting chapter, Genesis 22. We've all got dreams, haven't we? I don't know about you, but I had when I was younger, quite a few dreams of what I was hoping to become, dreams of what I was thinking I'd end up doing. Some of them were, really good dreams, I suppose, and some of them were probably a little bit crazy. As you get older, you start to realise some of those dreams ain't ever going to happen. And some of them are, and you tend to change your focus. I don't know about you, but my dreams now, I've still got some, but my dreams tend to focus more on my kids and other people, don't they? And what you would like for them. So this morning I'm talking about killing our dreams, and our passage, Genesis chapter 22, is talking about Abraham. Now, last week, Chris talked about the fact that Abraham had a vision. He'd had several visions, several revelations from God. And out of that, God gave him a promise. And that promise was, you will have a son. And then in chapter 16, Sarai, who had not been able to bear children, therefore took it upon herself, she and Abraham, to make sure that the promise would come about. And so through Hagar, Hagar bore Ishmael. This was I don't know if you knew, recently at the Billboard Music Awards 2021, Pink said, "Just dream big, because what if it comes true?" Isn't that a good idea? If we dream big enough, it may come true. But I suppose the question is, what if it does not come true? What if that which you truly love is lost? Or maybe you've put your faith in a particular outcome, and that outcome hasn't come about. Or maybe even God has asked you to let go of it. And the question is, will you obey? So there's three types of dreams I'd like to look at this morning. My dreams, which I want God to bless, and that can be quite often a disaster, but anyway, the dreams which I want God to bless. The God-given dreams. Now there's some God-given dreams that happen, so they're pretty good. I'm not going to look at that. But what about the God-given dreams that we need to let go of? And there's even two types within that, of which I'm going to share two stories from my life. The dreams God's given you that He takes back from you, well, He takes from you, or you have to let go, and He gives back to you. And the dreams, the ones He takes away forever. So I've recently just finished this book, Me, Myself and Bob. It's a good book if you want a good read. And this is Can you tell from looking at the red thing beside him is VeggieTales. The creator of VeggieTales, Phil Vischer. And he's written a book about his life. And it's a fascinating book because it's all about dreams, especially one big dream that Phil had. And he had this dream for a company he would call Big Idea Productions. And his idea was to teach children about right from wrong using God's messages from the Bible. And so he created VeggieTales. Now, I don't know about you, but that looks like a pretty good idea to me. In fact, his idea, like Pink said, he dreamed big. He wanted to be the next Disney. The next Disney in the world, but, of course, with a Christian focus. So you would think that with such a good idea like that, that surely God would want to bless it. And that was his thinking too. I'm doing something really good for God, therefore God, you should look after me. So he would go on to form a company that at its peak, the company turned over tens of millions of dollars. I think had a staff of over 80 people and was producing, which I'm sure you've all seen at some time or had to watch while the kids have watched, VeggieTales. And there's some great stuff there, isn't there? But Phil came to realise as the kingdom began to crumble and the dreams started to disappear, he came up with some interesting statements. We have no business telling God what we want to accomplish for Him, or dreaming up what we want to do for Him. So put up your, well, maybe I shouldn't ask that question. I can put my hand up because I've done that. Dreamed big for God. Told God what I think He should do. And helped God along, you know. And the verse which you're pretty familiar with, the people of God are not to be a people of vision, they are to be a people of revelation. So the word we use in the English Bible quite often is vision, but it shouldn't be vision, it should be without a revelation from God, what will happen? The people will perish. That's the verse in Proverbs. And he went on to say it required in his life a shift from the illusion that he was in control of his relationship with Christ to an absolute awareness that Jesus is the one guiding, controlling, and sustaining our journey. And it was pretty hard because his empire came crashing down, and he was pretty upset, and his life was a mess. But what he was really concerned about were the people, his staff, the people he had, the 80 or so that he started off, that he had to start laying off, because he had told God what God should do, and God came around and said, no. Now, do you see a problem in that? Why should God upset the lives of so many people because Phil had it wrong? Shouldn't he just, sorted Phil out and continued to bless it? It was a great idea. It was extremely successful at this point in time. It was the number had the, I don't know, it was like the top 5 Christian videos of all time were VeggieTale ones, and he had just produced Jonah the movie, doing great things. And it's a good movie, isn't it? I've seen it. and it all came crashing down. And with it, a whole lot of hurt people. Sometimes we get it wrong. And when we get it wrong, not only are we hurt, there's a few people along the way that are hurt with us. But God ultimately wants to teach us a lesson. He wants to test us. And in Genesis chapter 22 today, we see Abraham being tested about his dream. And his dream was a revelation from God. It was a promise from God. So sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to Abraham, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah and sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Burnt offering. What's a burnt offering? When you make a burnt offering, is there anything left? No. So why was God saying to Abraham, having made a promise to Abraham, a covenant, an agreement with him, that through his offspring, Isaac, you will be blessed? Not only you, but the rest of the world. And now I want you, Abraham, to kill him. Not just kill him, to burn him up as you burn up a sacrifice on an altar. Now, I don't know about you, but if God told that to me, I'd be saying, God, you need to do some thinking about that, because that does not fit with what I know about you. That is not what a loving God would ask me to do. And further, to confuse it all, is this wonderful verse in Jeremiah 7:31. They have built pagan... this is the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah from the Lord. They have built pagan shrines at Topeth, the garbage dump in the valley of Ben Hinnom. There they burn their sons and daughters in the fire. I, this is God speaking, have never commanded such a horrible need. It has never even crossed my mind to command such a thing. So how do you like that verse with what we're reading in Genesis chapter 22? Does that fit? Doesn't seem to, does it? What are you doing, God? Are you lying? The real question here is not that God was asking Abraham to sacrifice a child, because as we have read just in Jeremiah, God was never intending that Abraham burn him up on the altar. But what God was doing was testing Abraham. And so the question we need to ask is, why was Abraham being tested by God? This was a dream God had given him. So why was God having to test him? And the answer to that lies by looking back. Where had Abraham come from? And there's some key things we read in the chapters beforehand. And most of it comes from chapter 16, the birth of Ishmael. And what happened in that chapter? I am getting too old. Who was it that said that? I am too old. Sarah said, I am getting too old. So let us do something about this, Abraham. And what does she do? She takes a concubine, and Abraham sleeps with her and bears a child, Ishmael. Genesis chapter 16. So here's how Tim Mackey from the Bible Project puts it. To sexually abuse an Egyptian slave to produce a son, I added the last bit, is a disaster in the making. Because that's what he was doing. He was trying to bring about God's promise his way. And so Abraham's test is all about proving his character. And the only way Abraham was going to prove his character, one way or the other, was to demonstrate it. And so God said, take your son, your only son, and kill him on the altar. Abraham's trust in God was to be weighed in the balance against common sense, human affection, lifelong ambition, against anything earthly. And I can tell you from my own life, and I'll share a couple of examples in a minute, that this is the hardest thing I have ever had to go through. When a dream that you have been given by God is taken away from you. When you are being weighed in the balance against all you know, believe, have put your trust in, then it's really hard. And so Abraham, he's about to sacrifice his son, and what does he do? He gets up early the next morning. Now, I don't know about you, but I would not get up early the next morning. I would get up as slowly as I could because I would not be wanting to do it. But he got up early, loaded the donkey, took two of his servants, cut enough wood for the burnt offering, and set out for the place God told him about. So what was going on in Abraham's mind here? What was he going to do? He was going to sacrifice his son. There's no doubt that that's what he thought he was going to do. Stay there with the donkey, Abraham told the servants. The boy and I will travel a little farther. We will worship there. Then we will come right back. So what's Abraham thinking here? I am going to sacrifice my son. I've got the wood. I'm going up there. I'm going to put him on the altar. I'm going to kill him. And what's going to happen? God is going to raise him from the dead. So Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac. And he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father, Abraham. Father, yes, my son, Abraham replied. The fire and the wood are here, Isaac said, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. Okay, so this is getting more complicated, isn't it? Okay. So he's placed the wood he needs to burn his son on the back of his son. So what does this tell us about his son? How old is Isaac? They reckon 10 to 13 years of age. So his son has the wood on his back. Abraham, who's 100, maybe just over 100, is carrying the fire and the knife, because that's all he could manage. Yeah. So what does this tell you about his son Isaac? What could have he done? He could have run. He didn't have to do what his father said if he didn't want to. But he chose to be obedient to his father, to carry the wood on his back, knowing that he was the one about to be sacrificed. And because there was no lamb or whatever. But God will provide. What is God going to provide? So Hebrews, it was by faith that Abraham offered Isaac as a sacrifice when God was testing him. Abraham, who had received God's promises, was ready to sacrifice his only son Isaac, even though God had told him, Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted. Abraham reasoned that if Isaac died, God was able to bring him back to life, and in a sense, Abraham did receive his son back from the dead. So here is Isaac with the wood on his back, heading up to the altar on Mount Moriah to be sacrificed, obedient to his father right to the end. Who are we talking about here? Who is this pointing to? This is pointing to Jesus. The author of this book wants us to see who here. He wants us to see what God the Father is going to do through Jesus. But the difference, of course, with Jesus is Jesus would carry the cross on his back, he would be sacrificed, and he would be killed, unlike Isaac. So when they arrived at the place where God had told him to go, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. Then he tied his son Isaac, laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Abraham picked up the knife to kill his son as sacrifice. So here is a willing son lying on the altar as his father holds a knife about to kill him. And what happens? The angel intervenes and says, Abraham, do not kill your son. And what God learned about Abraham that day was he was willing to let go of everything before he would let go of God. And he demonstrated to God, to everyone, his faith. So, practical application. My story. Okay. Let me tell you a little bit of my story.
Was much younger there?
Yeah, I was much younger. I'm going to even start a little bit younger. Some of you would know this and some of you won't. I was born on the North Shore of Auckland. My parents used to go to church occasionally, my mother mainly. I was sent to Sunday school, and sometime when I was very young, God spoke to me and I decided I wanted to become a missionary. I didn't really know what that meant. I was pretty serious though, because when I came at 17 years of age, when I made my decision to go to university, I remember vividly seeking God for guidance and saying to him, what would be useful as a missionary? And I came down to doing agriculture and horticulture, and I decided that agriculture was probably more useful to God on the mission field than horticulture, so I'd do agricultural science. Went off to university, really grew in my faith. At the end of my time at university, I said to God, so is this missions thing something I should do or not? So I thought, I'll test it. and went on a short-term summer program with OMF to the Philippines. Got there, I think I was there for 6 weeks, came back and said, yeah, this is what God wants me to do. I'm going to be a missionary. We decided that talk to people, and they said a bit of work experience, life experience would be good, so found a job in Papakura, South Auckland, went along to a local church who I thought was missions minded, and like I said, I was serious enough to say to God, if I am going to marry someone, they have to be missions focused too, because it's no good me marrying someone who's not interested in mission. And so I met Gillian. She had been on a short-term missions trip as well. She was serious, and so Gillian and I got married. We really felt God was calling us to the Philippines, so joined a mission organisation called Servants, did, I can't remember how long, but several weeks orientation with them in Christchurch, came back to Auckland, told our church we wanted to head to the Philippines, got their support, and then one day John Bolshin, who was the minister, the missions committee person, Gillian and I, and Mick Duncan from Servants, and I think there might have been someone else from Servants, all sat down in our front living room and to discuss when we were going to the Philippines and how that was all going to be. And Mick Duncan says to us, don't need missionaries in the Philippines anymore. Don't need missionaries in the Philippines anymore. What? We've been preparing for this long and you're telling us that you don't think you want us now? So how do you think that made me feel and Gillian feel? I was shattered. We were both shattered. This is a dream I have had since a child, to go to the mission field, and here he's saying, Mick Duncan is saying, well, this is how I heard it. He might describe it in a different way, but this is what I heard. We don't need you anymore in the Philippines. Don't need you as a missionary. My dream had been killed with one blow. So Mick Duncan said, well, you should do some Bible college training, in preparation for being a missionary somewhere else. And you should go to Bible college in New Zealand, or maybe go to Tasmania to MTC. And I was crying and I was wiped out, and I walked away from that meeting and I spent days saying, God, how could I have got it? How could we have got it so wrong? And we listened to what he said and took his advice and decided, well, we were heading overseas to the Philippines anyway, so rather than go to Bible college in New Zealand, let's go to Tasmania. That's sort of overseas. It's not a missionary, but anyway, we'll go. So we went. And as we went there, in 2 years' time, God gave us the dream back again. So why did he do that? Why did he kill the dream and then give it back to us? Because he wanted to know what was more important to Ross. I can speak about myself. I can't say for Gillian, but certainly for me, what was most important? Was it the dream or was it God? And I had to come to the realization it was God. So, we got our dream back. I had to deal with a couple of issues. I suppose this is Phil again, and he sums it up pretty well. God loves you not because of what you can do, or even because of what you can become if you work really, really hard. He loves you because he made you. He loves you just the way you are. He loves you even when you aren't doing anything at all. We really shouldn't attempt to do anything for God until we've learned to find our worth in Him and Him alone. Had I found my worth in God and God alone? No. I was trying to prove to God that I was worthy of Him saving me. And my way of proving to him was to become a missionary. Isn't that a good thing to do for God? And I had to learn that he loved me whether I was a missionary or not. Whatever I was doing or not doing. The God who created the universe, he is enough for us. He alone is enough for us. Even without our dreams, without the better life, the healthy child, the happy marriage, the rewarding work, that you put it in there, whatever you like. That my kids do really well. Whatever. You can put anything you like in there. Is he enough? Or are you a little bit like me? Well, God, I think you should do this. I think you should do this for my kids. I think you should do this for me. You know, a bit of negotiation. So God called us to sacrifice our children upon the altar. So this is our children and this is us. We're about to head to India. And some of our relatives were so upset with what we were going to do, sacrifice. I'm being honest here. They were telling us that you are going to sacrifice your kids. They have no choice in this matter. You do. You cannot take them to India. What made it worse was some of Gillian's relatives knew what India was like, really knew what it was like. I was a bit naive. I didn't really know what India was going to be like. This is the vision that I've been given back, the dream I've been given back. And so we were going to take our children. We even had one relative say, I am going to take the passport off you so you can't go. Not because of Gillian and myself, because we were taking young kids to a really terrible place. And you know what? When I got to India and was there for quite a while, I had to agree with them. Sometimes I was sitting there thinking, once or twice, I wish you had taken it from us and we weren't here, because it was really bad. I remember being on the bed one day and Jonathan was as sick, and I just didn't know what to do, and I was crying out to God, Lord, do something. I can't put up with his crying, and he's really sick, and I have no idea how I can help him. So yeah, the dream. So just to fill you in on the map, the best thing that ever happened to my kids was going to India. And it was the hardest thing, but God looked after them. So, I don't know, you can ask them what they think about India, but as far as I know, it didn't do anything too bad to them, despite the stories I can tell you. Okay, so this is the final test. And this is the final test. This is the test that is the hardest test of all. This is when God gives you a dream and takes that dream away and doesn't give it back. So we've been in India 6.5 years or so on the mission field. I went to India fully believing that I was going to be there at least 20 years, possibly live out the rest of my life there. I was going to plant churches. I was going to do all these things because that's what God wanted me to do. That was the dream He had given me. And in 2005, the beginning of February, we came back to New Zealand. And I was shattered. It took me 6 months and a lot of arguing with God. Why? That was a waste of time, God. You took me all that way, all that hassle, all that everything that we've been through 6.5 years, and then you blooming well bring me back to New Zealand. I didn't want to be back here. I wanted to be where I thought God wanted me to be, which was India. So what happens when you're given a dream and then God takes it away? This is the test. This is is the test in one way or another that we all face. That's my story. I don't know what your story is, but that's my story. And the question is, do we want God's blessing? Are we focused on what He can do for us, or are we focused on Him and Him alone? And you know what? I was still focused on what I thought I could do for God. And I could have, I think, done great things for God in India if I'd stayed there another 10 years. I'm sure I would accomplish great things, I'm sure. But that was not the plan God had for me. And I had to leave that dream behind, come back here, and in a sense start from scratch. And and learn that all that matters is God and Him alone. Summed up really well in the book of Daniel. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. And He will deliver us from your Majesty's hand. But even if He does not, we want you to know, Your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods. Even if He does not bring about the dreams, the wishes, the things that we want, or that we even believe that He wants us to do or see happen, even if the outcome in our life is not what we want, will we still trust Him? Will we still trust Him? It's a hard lesson. I'm talking about myself here. It's a hard lesson to learn. That nothing I can do, nothing I can say really matters. And as Rachel shared in the beautiful illustration this morning, those eyes look in to their mother in a really trusting way, and they say, I'm putting my trust in you, and you alone. So, my question. I have, I'll leave these here. You can take them away, the notes, and they have these questions on it. You can take them home and meditate on it. Do you have a dream? Even a God-given dream? And are you willing to let it go? Because if you're not, it's an idol. Do we or you or whoever love the rewards and benefits of being a child of God, or do you truly love God? Because when you're in the midst of suffering and hardship, if your trust is not in God alone, your trust is in what He can do for you, you're going to struggle. You really are. And finally, maybe you, like I was trying to prove to God that I was truly worthy of His love. Don't try. Don't try to prove to God anything, because He loves you. He loves you just the way you are. And there's nothing you can do or not do that will change that. It's a great song, this. And I leave you with, in a sense, an anthem. Thou, there is nothing in this world that could ever satisfy. Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in Him. Everything I need. Let me pray. Lord, I want to thank You for the dreams that You have given us, the revelations that You have provided, Lord. And I pray that You will help us to take those dreams and to put our trust completely in You. Lord, you are enough for us. We don't need anything else. Help us to understand that. Help us, like Abraham, to demonstrate that in our lives. Help us to be obedient, Lord, to you.